Hello my friends. The world politics was always full of phrases like the might is right, or you don't have permanent friend or enemy, or stab in the back, and sometimes like those that show the face of the world politics is not beautiful. Also, the reality of politics is engaged with such a terms, and stab in the back is a routine, but there are some cases that show us. In the world politics, we can see chivalrous and faithful people who remain a trustworthy friend for their allies even when they fall or they are in need, and they do that beyond the self-interest considerations. In this video, I'm going to show you such politicians. They are really rare, but we can find them. I don't want to judge negative or positive aspects of politicians. It's not my business to label them as good or bad. But I think at least in some aspects we can call some of them brave or manly politicians. So let's start. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Iranian Shah, and Anwar Sadat, the Egyptian president. Upheavals that ended up in Iranian coup d'etat or revolution was full of politics words such as stab in the back or betraying. In 1979, in the Guadeloupe Conference among heads of France, USA, Germany and England, they easily stabbed the Shah in the back.
The crisis in Iran also causes ripples at international level. French President of State Giscard d'Estaing invites the German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, US President Carter and British Prime Minister Callaghan to Guadeloupe for a conference. Here, they decide on the fate of Iran.
Nos entretiens ont fait apparaître un double objectif, accroître la sécurité et réduire les tensions dans le monde. Il nous est apparu que la reconnaissance légitime des réalités du monde contemporain doit s'accompagner de la poursuite des efforts pour améliorer les relations internationales.
This means that the Western powers drop the Shah and his regime. On the 16th of January 1979, the Shah and his family leave Iran. The Shah expects the crisis to be over soon so that he can return. It turns out to be a farewell for good.
But when it comes to the president of Egypt and his relation with the last Iranian king, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the words chivalrous and manhood are fit for describing what Anwar Sadat did to his friend Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. So let's have a look to what happened. When the opponents of Iranian Shah attend in France and they have fully access to mass media like BBC, and US sent General Robert Heiser to dissuade Iranian generals and commanders from preventing the revolution, the Iranian king left the country and fled to Egypt on January 17, 1979, where his friend Anwar Sadat awaited him.
The Shah, piloting his own Boeing 707, touched down at Aswan Airport, and there, to give him a royal head of state welcome, pressed warmly and chatted briefly. It was exactly a year ago that the Shah and the Empress visited President and Mrs. Sadat here at Aswan. Sadat was still in the bloom of his peace initiatives, and the Iranian leader had come to give his support, just as he had supported Sadat in Egypt during and after the 73 war. This is a far more somber visit, and yet the Shah showed no signs of the ordeal of the past few months. A few thousand Egyptians lined the route, cheering the leaders. For the beaming Shah, it was a morale-boosting experience. It has been a long time since people in the streets have turned out to demonstrate in his support.
Anwar Sadat welcomed the king with open arms. In the Egypt, the king visited former US President Gerald Ford, and the royal family were told that they cannot go to the US for some political considerations. After a short while, Mohammad Reza Shah and his family went to Morocco, where he did not receive a warm welcome. Again, for some political considerations, they left Morocco and went to Bahamas, where they faced much limits and considerations. After that, they went to Mexico, and they stayed there longer than the other states. In Mexico, Shah's health deteriorated, and he had to go to US for treatment. Shah suffered from cancer. After the treatment, he had to leave US, and when he intended to return to Mexico, Mexican authorities refused to accept him. The king and his family had no choice but to go to Panama. Suddenly things changed in Panama, and the royal family was informed that there is possibility of extradition to Iran as a part of compromise plan for US diplomats who were taken hostage in Iran by revolutionary forces. The USA sent two representatives, Louis Cutler, the lawyer, and Irene Rafael, the US ambassador to Panama, to talk with Shah and persuaded him to abandon the title of king, and he and his family would not have any claim as king of Iran, and even they submitted themselves to Iranian revolutionary regime. The last Shah of Iran was really in hard, severe and difficult conditions. In this upheaval, Anwar Sadat called them and invited them to go to Egypt. He was their savior angel. Sadat wanted to send an Egyptian airplane for the king and his family, but US provided them an airplane. Anwar Sadat helped Mohammad Reza beyond all political considerations.
Islam never preaches hatred at all. The country now is in chaos, and he has taken power since last February for about 11 months now, and Iran is one of the richest countries in the world. They have a revenue of more than $250 million a day. He can build a villa and a car for every citizen there. Instead, the country is in chaos, no one rules, there's no government, and then this hostage, disgraceful thing that has taken place, especially when there has been women among them, for the sole reason that he wants to prove himself as a revolutionarist against the United States. What has the United States to do with the Shah? The Shah has left Iran, and he is now a sick man thousands of miles out of Iran. I can't understand him. He is a lunatic. He is not a Muslim. I can say it because I am a Muslim. Where will Iran be heading? No one knows. But we can know one fact, that it is chaos, anarchy, and destruction.
واقعا تنها کسی که آدم میتونه بگه مرد واقعی بود و شجاع پرزیدنت سادات بود. هیچ کسی دیگه، من این مصاحبه رو ندیده بودم، هیچ کسی از سران قدرت‌های دنیا یه همچین صحبتی نکرد، یه حقایقی رو نگفت، و فقط پرزیدنت سادات.
Our position remains like it is. We are ready to receive him immediately, and we didn't receive anything officially.
On his arrival, the former Shah looked tired, and he was greeted with emotion by President Sadat, the only world leader prepared to offer him sanctuary. Then to this heavily guarded military hospital.
تنها دوستی که اون موقع در کنار ایشون بود پرزیدنت سادات بودن. یعنی و خب کم کم گفتیم بچه‌ها بیان مصر. واقعا خانواده سادات اینقدر مهربون بودن و اصولا مردم مصر خیلی با مهمان نوازی، با مهربونی، هر جا که ما میرفتیم، تو بازار، تو خیابون، هر جا خیلی با مهربونی میپذیرفتن ما رو.
President Sadat, could you take a minute? No. Will the Shah be staying in Egypt?
We'll have ample time after the operation to speak with you, gentlemen and ladies.
You will stay here permanently, sir?
Yes.
Team of the French and Egyptian doctors are seeing to it that everything is under control and there may be no need to a new operation. But even if it takes place, it is a minor one.
According to presidential sources, contingency plans have already been drawn up should the Shah suddenly die. In Cairo's Al Rafai Mosque, where King Farouk and other members of the Egyptian royal family are buried, a crypt has already been prepared for the Shah. Ironically, the same place where the Shah's father was once buried. The body was removed and taken back to Iran when the Shah, after a previous exile, regained the throne in the 1950s.
Anwar Sadat was the only politician who held a funeral for Shah and participated in the Shah funeral. He believed the last Iranian Shah deserved respect as a king. Anwar Sadat stayed with Mohammad Reza Shah until the last days of King's life.
For me, the Shah was a friend, a Muslim brother, and a man who stood with Egypt and with me in our difficult moments. You can't imagine. I should have liked that he would have lived 6 months like any human being. Since the day he arrived here, no one knows that he was suffering. I can't imagine what extent this suffering has been. He said, if anything happens to me, I want to be buried in Egypt. Well, we are fulfilling his wish, his will. He asked for a very simple funeral, but we are going to give all due respect to this man.
موقعی که تابوت اعلیحضرت در اونجایی که گذاشته بودن با پرچم ایران و بعد از تمام مدت ها سرود شاهنشاهی زدن، خب خیلی همه تحت تاثیر واقع شده بودیم.
Under a blazing sun, the funeral procession made its way through the streets of Cairo. It might have been happening in a vacuum. Those who had come to mourn the Shah were few, his family, of course. His widow, Faradiba, condemned perhaps to a life of further isolation. The Shah's son, Reza, now an American college student, a symbol perhaps for royalist forces wishing to overthrow the Ayatollah Khomeini. Behind the gun carriage too, President Sadat and his wife, ever faithful, ever grateful for what the Shah had done for Egypt, and Richard Nixon, judged here today by many as a man at least faithful to a former American ally.
The tomb where the Shah's body was buried today may, according to sources here in Cairo, be only a temporary one. It was a simple Islamic ceremony in the end, one which so moved the Shah's twin sister that she fainted and had to be carried outside to recover.
He really showed a friend in need is a friend indeed. Anwar Sadat was assassinated by a group of militaries who were affiliated with Islamic radicals led by Lieutenant Khalid Islambuli in 1981. The second case I'm going to talk about is Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, and Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian President. After the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, and while the German politicians were in the dilemma to break off or not to break off relations with Russia, impose or not to impose sanctions, buy or not to buy gas and oil from invaders, and while French president tried to be a mediator in the war, it was Boris Johnson who manly and bravely defended Ukraine's sovereignty and its president Volodymyr Zelenskyy. On the other side, the Ukrainian president refused Americans' suggestion to leave the country and go to USA and choose to fight against invaders beside Ukrainian people. When Ukraine was under attack by Russian forces, Boris Johnson went to Ukraine on April 9, 2022 to show his friend that Ukraine is not alone, and he provided Ukraine weapons that cost millions of pounds. When Boris was about to be impeached and leave the Prime Minister's house, he had another visit from Ukraine and provided more materials for his ally, Zelenskyy. I'm sure what makes Boris to do that was beyond the simple political considerations, on the contrary of what Germany did. Germany acted in a conservative way with political considerations because of its dependency to Russian oil and gas. And what was the result? Russia used and will use oil and gas as a weapon and prefer to burn gas near Finland borders rather than exporting to Germany. No one denies what Britain did for Ukraine was in its interest, but I strongly believe that what Johnson did for Zelenskyy was beyond just political considerations. We can call both of them chivalrous politicians who acted manly towards each other and their people. For understanding that, just compare it to what happened in Afghanistan and the reaction of Ashraf Ghani, the former president of Afghanistan, or what Western countries did to Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as we saw in previous part of this video. Zelenskyy had such a friends like Boris Johnson, while Ashraf Ghani found his friends among politicians from Iran, Qatar, Pakistan, or Turkmenistan. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson will not be in power after 5th September 2022, and I hope his successor will continue his policy of chivalrous and manhood.